You respond, not react. This single behavior separates the average from the exceptional. The moment something doesn't go your way, someone insults you, ignores you, betrays you, or challenges your ego, the primitive instinct is to retaliate, to assert dominance, to prove your worth through force. But a hive, you person has no need to prove anything. You've outgrown the emotional reflex of reacting just because you feel something. You've come to understand that emotional maturity isn't the absence of feeling. It's the discipline to pause and investigate what you feel before acting on it. When someone disrespects you, you don't immediately get pulled into their emotional frame. You evaluate, is this worth your energy? Does responding serve your higher purpose? Will this alter the outcome in a meaningful way, or is it just ego trying to be heard? In a Stoic mindset, you realize that every reaction is a moment of power given away. If someone can pull you out of character with a few words or actions, then they own you. But when you respond instead of react, you reclaim that ownership. You become the master of your emotions, not their slave. You observe what is happening inside you without being consumed by it. You understand that your peace is too expensive to give away freely, so you protect it. You breathe, you pause, you analyze, you choose a response that aligns with your principles, not your momentary mood, and sometimes the highest form of response is none at all, just silence, distance, and calm detachment. This doesn't mean you're passive or weak. In fact, it takes far more strength to remain composed when disrespected than it does to lash out. Reactivity is impulsive and easy. Responsiveness is intentional and rare. People feel the difference. They begin to treat you differently, not because you demand respect, but because you command it through your composure. You don't yell to be heard. Your presence alone makes others quiet. You are calm not because life is easy, but because you've trained yourself to remain centered even when everything around you is pulling at your emotions. This kind of power isn't loud. It's internal and unshakable. It's not something you broadcast. It's something you embody. You don't chase, you attract. There's a profound shift that happens when you stop seeking things outside yourself to feel validated. The majority of people move through life in pursuit, chasing approval, attention, affection, or validation, constantly trying to prove their worth to others. But a hive, you person operates from a place of internal abundance. You understand that real confidence doesn't beg, it doesn't broadcast. It simply exists. You are the source, not the seeker. You don't need to force conversations, convince others of your value, or cling to people who only see a fraction of your worth. You let people come to you, not because you're playing games, but because you know your time, energy, and presence are not to be given away cheaply. This kind of energy is magnetic. It makes others curious, even confused. They wonder why you're not scrambling for their attention like everyone else. They start to question their own worth in your presence, not because you make them feel small, but because you don't chase them the way they're used to being chased. And in that absence, they begin to feel your value. You become the one who's chosen, not the one doing the choosing out of desperation or lack. The Stoics believed that what's meant for you will come, and what isn't will fall away. And your job is not to control, but to be prepared. Prepared through character, through self-discipline, through calm presence. When you stop chasing, your behavior changes in powerful ways. You stop overthinking messages. You stop explaining your worth. You stop bending your standards just to keep someone interested. You no longer tolerate lukewarm effort or halfway energy. You become comfortable with letting go of what's uncertain, inconsistent, or unsure. You don't panic when people leave. You don't beg them to stay. You let them, because your peace is rooted in the fact that you don't need to chase what's not aligned with your spirit. And the beauty of this approach, it naturally flips the dynamic. People feel it. They sense that you're different, that you're not like the ones who seek external permission to feel valuable. You radiate the energy of someone who's already whole. And that energy is irresistible. It doesn't manipulate, it doesn't demand, it simply exists. Like gravity, and just like gravity, people find themselves drawn to it, unable to fully explain why. Because deep down, everyone craves the presence of someone who doesn't need them to feel powerful. And that's exactly what you become when you stop chasing and start attracting from within. You master delayed gratification. In a world that is constantly whispering in your ear to take it now, enjoy now, don't wait. You choose the path that most avoid, the path of patience, restraint, and long-term discipline. This is not just about holding off on pleasures. It's about mastering yourself so deeply that you can delay emotional reactions, postpone indulgence, and sacrifice the short-term thrill for the long-term gain. A hive, you person doesn't live impulsively. You don't seek dopamine hits through temporary pleasure or shallow approval. You think in seasons, not seconds. You understand that everything truly valuable in life, health, wisdom, wealth, peace, and deep relationship, requires time, investment, and a willingness to delay what feels good now for what will feel great later. Most people are ruled by instant gratification. They want the result without the process. They want the love without the work, the body without the discipline, the money without the effort. But you know better. You understand that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is bridged by consistent, often boring effort. You're not seduced by shortcuts because you know what they cost: integrity, growth, and true satisfaction. You choose the gym when your body wants rest. You choose reading when your mind craves distraction. You choose silence when your ego wants to speak. That's what makes you hive, you, not just your results, but your ability to say no when everything in you screams yes. Delayed gratification is the ultimate flex in a world full of quick fixes. It's the highest form of self-control because it requires vision. It forces you to look beyond today and live in alignment with a future version of yourself. You eat clean not because you're on a diet, but because you're building a foundation. You study not to pass a test, but to sharpen your edge. You stay single not because you're unwanted, but because you refuse to settle. And in every one of these decisions you are telling the world, without saying a word, that you value yourself too much to accept the bare minimum. You are not living for the moment. You are mastering the moment to build a future only a disciplined man or woman will ever experience. The Stoics believed that freedom is not the ability to do what you want, but the ability to master your wants, and in that mastery lies true freedom. You are not bound by impulses, temptations, or emotional storms. You feel the pull of desire, but you pause, you reflect, and you choose your action consciously. Every time you resist the urge to take the easy path, you are carving deeper character into yourself, and people feel that. They may not know what makes you different, but they can sense it. There is strength in your silence, power in your patience, and value in your restraint. That's what makes you uncommon. That's what makes you hive. You set boundaries without guilt. This is one of the most overlooked yet powerful qualities of a hive. You individual. In a world that constantly demands your attention, your energy, your kindness, and your time, the ability to say no without apology is a sign of self-respect. You don't allow guilt to bend your standards or fear of judgment to keep you in places that drain you. You understand that not everyone is entitled to your access. Your space is sacred. Your time is limited. And your peace is not a gift you hand out freely. It's something you protect with clarity, with firmness, and with quiet confidence. Most people confuse kindness with submission. They think being liked means being available. But you know better. You know that if you don't set boundaries, people will create them for you, and they will always set them in ways that benefit themselves. So you take responsibility. You define what is acceptable and what is not. You teach people how to treat you not with words, but with consistency. You don't engage in emotional bargaining or beg for understanding. You draw a line and you enforce it, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Because you've learned. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from anything that tries to convince you to tolerate less than you deserve. You don't need to yell to assert a boundary. You don't need to explain it in endless detail. You understand that people who respect you will understand your no, without needing a full backstory. And those who don't respect you will never be satisfied no matter how much you explain. That's why a high-value person doesn't over-communicate in the face of disrespect. You simply remove yourself, you detach, you disengage, and in doing so, you reclaim your power. You stop trying to control others and instead focus on controlling your own standards. The Stoics believed that the only true domain we have control over is our own mind, our own choices. Boundaries are a reflection of that belief. They are an external expression of internal discipline. And the most powerful boundaries are not the ones you declare. They are the ones you enforce through action. You don't need to block someone to prove your strength, but you will do it if peace requires it. You don't burn bridges, but you don't keep walking back across them either. You create space where it's needed. You choose solitude over chaos. You stop responding to energy that's beneath your level of growth. And the beauty of it, you don't feel bad about it. You've realized that guilt is often just a symptom of your old self trying to survive in your new standards. But you've outgrown that version of yourself. Now, you make room only for what aligns with your values. And that's exactly why your presence becomes more powerful, more respected, and more rare. Because in a world full of people pleasers, you're a boundary setter. And that makes you untouchable. You keep your word, especially to yourself. This is the foundation of self-worth. When you say you're going to do something, you do it, not because someone is watching, not because there's a reward, but because your word means something. In a world full of empty promises and hollow commitments, the ability to follow through consistently is a rare and powerful trait. A high-value person does not treat their own word lightly. You understand that every time you break a promise to yourself, you chip away at your confidence. Every skipped workout, every snoozed alarm, every time you say, "I'll start tomorrow." But don't. You're training your subconscious to not take you seriously. Keeping your word isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about the integrity to act in accordance with your values, even when no one's holding you accountable. Especially when no one's holding you accountable, you become your own authority, your own standard bearer. The Stoics taught that character is forged not in the eyes of the crowd, but in private moments of decision when no applause is present. When you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you are making a quiet but powerful statement. I trust myself. And that trust compounds. That's how self-respect is built, not through external praise, but through internal consistency. Most people don't realize how deeply their sense of self is connected to their daily habits. When you say you're going to wake up early and you do, your mind learns, I follow through. When you tell yourself you'll eat clean, finish the project, or cut off a toxic relationship, and you actually follow through, your internal respect grows. And when your internal respect grows, so does your power. You no longer need validation from others because you've built something stronger. Self-certainty. You move through the world with quiet assurance, not because everything is easy, but because you know that you will show up for yourself, no matter how hard it gets. On the flip side, when you constantly lie to yourself, even in small, subtle ways, you slowly lose faith in your own word. Your goals become fantasies. Your plans become noise. You become someone who talks more than they act. And that gap between intention and action, that's where insecurity lives. That's where self-doubt festers. But when you close that gap, when you become someone who can rely on themselves every single day, your self-worth skyrockets. You don't need to prove anything to anyone because your actions have already proven it to the most important person, yourself. A high-value individual does not outsource discipline. You don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect mood, or the perfect conditions. You do what you said you would do when you said you'd do it. That's where real confidence comes from, and that's why people trust you. That's why you start to command respect without demanding it. Because everyone can feel the difference between someone who lives in alignment and someone who just performs it. You don't speak it, you are it. You've become dependable, solid, and unwavering, not just in the eyes of others, but most importantly, in your own eyes. You find strength in solitude. While most people run from silence, you sit in it. You don't fear being alone because you've done the hard work of facing yourself. In fact, you welcome the quiet. You've discovered that solitude is not loneliness. It's clarity, it's renewal, it's power. It's where you meet the rawest version of yourself, stripped of distractions, stripped of noise. And in that meeting, you realize something most never will. Your wholeness doesn't come from others. It comes from within. You're not looking for someone to complete you, to validate you, or to make you feel significant. You've already found that significance in your own reflection, in your stillness, in your solitude. The world conditions people to constantly be around others, to seek approval, to fear missing out, to define themselves by relationships or social circles. But you operate differently. You understand that being constantly surrounded doesn't mean you're connected. It can actually mean the opposite. Sometimes being surrounded by the wrong energy is more isolating than being completely alone. That's why you protect your solitude, not as an escape, but as a sanctuary. A place where you sharpen your thinking, reconnect with your purpose, and filter out the false narratives that society tries to push on you. When you spend time in solitude, you become emotionally self-sufficient. You stop craving noise to distract from your inner voids. You stop needing temporary connections to avoid facing your own growth. You learn to sit with your thoughts, even the uncomfortable ones, and in that space, you gain power over them. You sort through what's real and what's illusion. You break addictions to drama, overstimulation, and emotional dependency. You realize you can go days without external validation and still feel grounded. You can detach from chaos and still remain whole. You no longer fear the silence, because the silence has become your teacher. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself or avoid human connection. It means you no longer rely on others to feel complete. You enter relationships out of choice, not need. You give love, not desperation. You offer presence, not pressure. And that is exactly what makes your presence feel powerful. People are drawn to you because you're not trying to fill a void. You're overflowing from internal fullness. You've built that fullness in your solitude. You've discovered your real identity without the masks. And when you re-enter the world, you bring that energy with you, strong, centered, and untouchable. The Stoics revered solitude because they understood that it is where virtue is built. When you remove the distractions of the crowd, the applause, the opinions, you're left with the only voice that truly matters, your own. And when that voice is steady, grounded in logic, rooted in purpose, you become immune to the noise of the world. You stop comparing, you stop performing, you simply exist fully and unapologetically. That's the strength of solitude. It makes you formidable not through noise, but through depth, not through status, but through self-awareness, and that's what sets you apart. While the world drowns in distractions, you find clarity in your own company, and that clarity makes you unstoppable. So, if you see yourself in these signs, understand that you are not merely existing, you are evolving. You're choosing a higher path, one carved not by ego or external noise, but by character, discipline, and inner stillness. Being a hive, Val, you person isn't about being perfect, it's about being intentional. It's about choosing strength over comfort, truth over approval, and peace over chaos. And the more you walk this path, the less you need to explain yourself, because your energy, your actions, and your presence will speak for you. Stay on that path. The world may not always understand it, but it will always feel you're different.